Okay. I'm going to be talking to Mistress Vivienne, who will be here any moment, about boundaries and consent and how it changed both of our lives to learn about both those things and how they're intertwined. We're specifically going to be talking about my upcoming 4-week class. Vivienne also did my educator training and is now going to soon be offering their own classes and trainings to both one-on-one to people and in group settings. There they are. So they'll be in here in just a moment. And if you're interested in signing up for that 4-week, the link to register is in my bio. And please post your questions in the comments. I will make a note to say, ask us about that, and pin it to the bottom. Let's see. Okay. And then you do this, right? And then you're supposed to be able to pin it, okay? I think you have to, there we go. There you are. Hi.
Hi. Let me adjust myself. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi, you too. I can show you who else is here.
Ooh. Yeah, I can't see. Oh, hi, baby.
Tennessee. Hi, say hi.
Hi. Oh, I love the fur babies.
Yeah, she's here for this conversation. Okay, wait. So there was already a question, but I'm very interested in elaborating on permission being a subset of consent. Okay, cool. We can talk about that first. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'm trying to scroll up on the question and it seems like I can't,
Okay.
on my end, I can't control
It's asking for just more explanation of permission being part of consent, but not the entirety of consent.
Like to just elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day, and that so many people understand consent to be permission, and I like rarely think of it as permission at this point because
Yeah.
I've done so much like practice in what it is outside of just
Right.
permission. And consent to me is a practice, and it's very much a verb and not as much a noun. It's like when I think of consent now, I try to think of, like, how can I practice consent with myself? How can I practice consent with other people versus how can I get consent, or like I need to get consent from somebody, or I need to give my consent to somebody else. It's like it's all I think of consent more as a negotiation and communication practice between myself and other people.
Yeah. I'm hearing that it's a form of communication and a kind of negotiation as opposed to a transaction. So as opposed to like, I give you this, you get this, and then that means something is now okay. It's an ongoing practice. It's a way of communicating. I completely agree with that. I think what has happened is that the word consent, because we use it and we hear it so often as like a legal term, that like, did you get consent, or like, do I have your consent to record this conversation, for example. The two have gotten conflated, and so people think that, I've had people say to me like, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yeah. And then they ask a question and I'm like, I'm not comfortable with that. That's pushing my boundaries, or like, I don't want to. And they're like, well, you consented. And I'm like, well,
not quite.
that's not how it works, right? It's like,
right, yeah.
permission is like one small sort of cog in the consent machine where like it needs to be there, but it's also like you can revoke. That's why I don't like to talk about revoking consent, because you're really revoking permission when
Right,
you know when
yeah.
you change your mind. That's like part of the larger like flow and interplay of people and relationships and like what it is that we're trying to do when Betty Martin defines consent as like an agreement that we arrive at. I would define it more as a practice or a language.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when people talk about permission and they mean, or they say consent but they mean permission, it's really just, and I say this again and again, it's like it's just the tip of the iceberg, and that's often what you see. Like that's what you witness, is like someone
Right.
says, can I do this, and someone else says yes, and you're like, oh, that's consent. But really there's a whole, you know, a ton of stuff that's going on under the surface, like quite literally, you know, whether you're talking about like your subconscious or your neuroception or various kinds of perception around the way that someone says something, or their body language, or how they look at you when they're saying it, or how they don't look at you when they're saying it. Like that's all part of the practice of consent.
Yeah, it's definitely a process.
Right.
It's an active
a never
process.
ending process. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, great question. I introduced you before you got here. I'm wondering if you want to introduce yourself and if you want to tell people what it is that you offer, because I said that I'm offering my 4-week coming up, but that you also offer one-on-ones and possibly group stuff in the future.
Possibly group, hopefully group stuff in the future. Yeah, hi everyone. I am V, also known as Vivienne or Mistress Vivienne professionally. Or professionally in my pro-dom work. I'm also a consent and boundaries coach and educator, and I love working with other sex workers and other cutie BIPOC kinksters. So I do one-on-one coaching sessions, and I am working on some group classes. If you have any ideas or suggestions or desires, send them my way. I love talking about consent. I love talking about boundaries, kink, BDSM, sex work. I'm so into it. Oh, I go by they, them pronouns. And sometimes I go by she, her in certain professional circles also.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing this with me. I remember just from the very beginning of us knowing each other, being very struck by how you talk about these concepts and how aligned it felt. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the ways that this information and this content and like having access to it changed our lives. I can certainly speak from myself, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to start, the floor is yours.
Yeah. How has it changed my life?
Excuse me while I eat my egg.
No problem. I'm glad that you're feeding yourself. How has it changed my life? You know, the stage that I'm at, so I both like started working with you or like got to know you and sort of like really got into this practice for myself about a year ago. And I feel like the beginning stage was like very revelatory, right? Like I was learning about these concepts, you know, these frameworks like consent frameworks and concepts of boundaries, and learning about polyvagal theory and trauma and how and like self-regulation. regulating our nervous systems, and emotion regulation. And I was learning so much of these things in this period of time, and it was very revelatory. Like it's like paradigm shifting, right? Like I've heard you talk about that way. I talk about it that way. It's very paradigm shifting to learn about these concepts and frameworks in such a drastically different way than they're really talked about in kind of anywhere else, honestly, in a lot of other places, right? I definitely was not exposed to a lot of this information before I started taking the classes from you. And the stage that I'm at now, a year later, is very much like it's like I would call it like a growing pains kind of stage. It's like wow, like the like I can see so clearly, and awareness is part, like self-awareness is part of the practice.
Do you see who just joined us?
No, I didn't. Who joined us?
Uma's here.
Oh, hi, Uma. Yay. What was I gonna say? Yeah.
Growing pains.
Right, growing pains. So like self-awareness is a big part of, I think, the like self-consent practice, and like learning how to integrate these frameworks and these concepts in a practical way in our lives, or in my life. And I think, behavior change doesn't happen unless you have awareness of your own patterns, right? And so I'm in this stage where like I am learning more and more about, I'm like becoming more and more aware of my patterns, and I think I'm aware of them. And right now, actually, at this stage for me is the very challenging part of practicing behavior change, is like recognizing, sort of like honoring this past, honoring my like past patterns and past beliefs in how they have helped me to survive up to this point, and like honoring that, thanking that part of myself, but really taking a look at my life, my relationships, and seeing how much, thankfully for myself, like seeing how much safety there is when I wasn't aware of that safety before, and that the fear of bad things happening, I think, was keeping me from really being able to practice behavior change to the extent that I would like to, right? Yeah, I think like the question that you have for this for this talk, like why consent and boundaries, like why practice consent and boundaries, and the practice is a requirement because it's so difficult. Because like our like patterns of behavior are so ingrained in us, in everybody, right? However you are, however you move through the world, those are your behaviors. A lot of behaviors are like conditioned, and it just takes a lot of awareness and practice to realize where the actual safety is, who you can trust to, be totally honest around, who you can trust to support you in your practice of being honest.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to, I've been thinking about this because I was listening to your album.
Aww.
I was listening to your album, and a line from Prelude 77 really struck me, which is honesty takes a lot of practice. I mean, there's so much of you in all of the songs, but that one really stood out to me. So I was like, honesty does take practice. It's very hard.
It does. It does. I don't think you ever approach any kind of finish line either, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you just keep going.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to that.
Oh, look at you. You're welcome, and thank you for sharing that with the world.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, a lot of what you said really resonates with me. I think what I was finding was like, I was, you know, I've been in and out of therapy since I was 16, so like half my life now. And what I've been sort of struggling with, and I've actually finally started talking to my therapist about this. I've been struggling with the way that talk therapy, you know, most kinds of talk therapy, help you understand yourself and piece together the narrative of your life and understand who you are and why you are the way you are and see your patterns and all those things. And that's really important. That's also like a skill set that at a certain point, I feel like I'm like pretty good at that, you know, like as you were saying, like I'm pretty good at being like, this is the pattern, you know, this is why. And I developed this pattern because it was a survival tool when XYZ, and it's no longer like serving me. And the limitations that I keep running into that I've been talking to my therapist about now are like, then what? You know, like then what do I do? And like, and there's not a lot of tools and skills and practice. And so when I started to learn these things about consent and boundaries and trauma and the ways that they all are interrelated, I was also going through a period of really trying to figure out what was going on with my health. And I'm still in the process of like healing my gut and dealing with, you know, I'll be dealing with chronic illness forever. But it was right at the time that I started finding out about consent and boundaries in like a real sort of practical, applicable way, that I found out what it was that I had. And it turned out it was several things, and that a lot of them are caused, at least epigenetically. You know, I was like genetically predisposed, but then epigenetically triggered by various forms of trauma and stress. And environmental factors. Like I was on antibiotics a lot as a kid, and I didn't breastfeed, and I was a C-section, all these other things. But a lot of the emotional components, like the stress stuff, was, you know, I could see it in my childhood. I could see like events that happened, and also more chronic things. And what I was beginning to notice was the ways that I was ignoring my body. And I was telling my body, like, shut up, I'm in charge. You need to listen to me. Be normal. Be like all the other kids, you know, eat the cake, eat the pizza, eat the ice cream. And because everyone will think you're weird if you don't. And I was conditioning my body to believe, and because it was true, that I was not going to listen no matter how loud it screamed at me. And so that's where I think, you know, people have asked me about, like, when I talk about self-consent or like consent with myself, and they're like, why don't we just have a different word for that? And I'm like, you know, at least in my experience, like, it is the same process. It is the same process of listening to my body and saying, I hear you, I understand you, and I hear your no, and I'm going to respect that no, and that we can be in conversation about like what your needs are and what your boundaries are, and I'm not going to push you past that. So it really, it felt to me like it's the same process. It's just a matter of like whether I'm turning it inward or turning it outward. And what I have sort of concluded at this point is that, like, when you're doing one, you're doing the other. You know, like they're just inextricably linked that way. So this, I mean, I truly like attribute a great deal of the healing that I've been able to accomplish and experience, like with my gut and my body, to this work and understanding trauma, understanding my boundaries, understanding what they feel like, and then the confidence that comes from knowing that I'm going to be able to advocate for myself, knowing that I'm going to be able to ask for what I want, and also knowing that I'm going to be okay if someone tells me no. And that sometimes that no is coming from my body. You know, like if my body says, you're not doing this IG Live with me today, then I'm going to be like,
okay, I hear you. And there may be a process of negotiation, you know,
Yeah.
where maybe I say to my body, like, could you do it for 20 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, I almost canceled on you because I was so hungry. And I was like, well, hey, body, what would you like to eat? And, you know, I couldn't go to the place down there because whatever. And so I went to the place over here and I found the egg salad. And so there was like, you know, there was a bit of like, what do you need? That conversation with my body, and then being like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can meet these needs and I'm listening to you and I hear you and I understand that you don't want to do this while you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of how it changed my life. I think it definitely made me a much more confident person because I think I move with a sense of safety through the world that doesn't come from like me being at home or me necessarily only being around people that I know and love and who I know support me. Like I can feel
Mm-hmm.
safe, you know, interacting with a stranger. I can feel safe interacting with my friends. I can even interact with people where I feel like incredibly misaligned values wise because I have a really strong like internal sense of this is who I am, and I also know my limits. You know, I was hanging out with a
Mm-hmm.
friend a few weeks ago, and someone that I know, who's her friend, was also there, and it just, you know, there was some gender stuff that came up, and I was like paying attention to my body during it, and I was like monitoring my tone because my tone tells me a lot about how I'm feeling, and I think up until even like very recently, I would have gotten really snappy with this person. I think I would have gotten really irritated and really impatient. And
Mm-hmm.
instead, I was able to stay very centered because I was like, you don't ever have to see this person again. You can leave today and you can tell I could tell my friend, um, I don't want to hang out with that person anymore. So please tell me in advance, like if I'm going to be over and she's going to come over. And just knowing that I was going to be able to do that like put
Mm-hmm.
me at ease in a situation where um, had I not had that sense of confidence or like awareness of this is what I can do to accomplish these, you know, to feel safe,
Yeah.
I would have just felt horribly unsafe the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I ask you a
Mm-hmm.
question I'm curious about?
Yes.
What would you have done in the past before you had like learned or practiced those tools or felt that sense of confidence and safety in your with yourself?
Well, I think a couple things might have happened. One would have been that I would have not noticed how uncomfortable I was, and
Right.
I would
Yeah.
have tried to just push push through the situation. You know, I would have been like, something doesn't feel right here, but I'm going to ignore it.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that I might have just left because I would have felt like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to stay in this situation and feel safe, or I don't know how to stay in this situation and not feel, you know, violated, honestly. Like it was just sort of an onslaught of like misgenderings and like sort of baseline talking was just yelling. It was like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think I would have not been totally aware of what I was feeling. I would have tried to suppress it. I would have tried to just exit the situation. But I really wanted to spend time with my friend. And so I was kind of like, I'm going to stay until I feel that I can't anymore. And I got to that point and then I left.
Mm-hmm. Good taking care of yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I also um like knew that I was hungry. And so there was like another part of me that was like, why don't I get some
Mm-hmm.
food, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and see if I can stay in this situation. And like even the person that I was sort of who was kind of driving me crazy, I was like, you know, I've known her for a long time and like we have like certain history in common and friends in common, and it wasn't a situation where I wanted to be like I don't want to not be able to be around that person because she's around some people that I really do care about like frequently, and I want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
be in that kind of situation and not have to like entirely avoid it if she's around at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like to go back to like how this practice has helped you, and how learning about these things has helped you, it's like you learn to find or see like what in that situation, the specific parts of that situation or relationship that were detrimental for you, that you didn't want to be around, that would not be good for you to be around, but also you were able to still see the parts of that situation and those relationships that were either like good, that you wanted to stay around them, or
Right.
it's neutral, that like, you know, you're not threatened by them. I think there's
Connected, and I just want to get them back.
that's
Why I can't get them to connect again. Maybe I can use my wired ones. Hold on.
sure.
I don't.
Where are you? Are you at a dog park?
No.
Every time I talk to you, you're at a dog park.
No. And I because I just wanted to be outside
In the sunshine. Yeah.
but for some reason it just like disconnected me from. Okay, well, that's fine. I can just hold that like that. So you were talking about.
I was saying that it sounds like the like sort of practicing these things like made you able to be aware of the specific things, sort of like teasing out the specific things about that situation and those relationships that you didn't want to continue, you didn't want to be around, they were detrimental, but then there were also things in that situation and those relationships that you wanted to continue to be around, that you were beneficial to you, that you know, that were either things that you wanted to continue being around or like neutral things that were not a threat to you.
Yes.
And so you had, sounds like you had more information to make the choice that you wanted to make,
right,
about staying or not.
I think that's a really good like summary of what was going on, because I think that in the past I would have been like, I don't like this, and like not really known why. And there is something very, you know, that can really ease, like put your nervous system at ease when you're like, oh, that's why. And then because it also helps me go, well, I can make sure that never happens again. Is that something that I want to make sure never happens again? And having that specificity leaves me with like clarity about how to protect myself and clarity about why I felt the way that I felt, so that I'm not sort of there being like, do I dislike everybody here, or like, you know, what happened, or like, was I just in a bad mood or something? Like having that specificity is very settling. I think that's a really good point. And that also makes me think of like specific in consent in Fries, where like the S is for specific, because that is where a lot of like nervous system prep comes in, where you're like, well, what are we doing? Like, what's the plan? And then you can negotiate the plan. But if you don't know, it can be very unsettling.
Yeah. This is reminding me of, this is making me think of the concept of neuroception, which is polyvagal theory. And I was talking in the beginning about how like I feel like I'm in this stage right now of like the practice part, like
Right.
implementing all these tools into my like actual behavior, and how difficult that is. And part of that practice for me has been about like becoming more aware my of my neuroception,
Mm-hmm.
and when my neuroception is a little faulty,
Yeah.
uh, and how that faulty neuroception has, you know, helped to keep me safe in the past, but is, you know, like you said, like no longer serving me in the ways that I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to serve me. Um, and I'm like you know, trying to practice these like specificity, or like the awareness of what specifically is going on in
Right.
whatever situation I'm in or whatever relationship I'm in, so that I can sort of like rework my relationship to, or like
Mm.
grow awareness, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in with the relationship that I have to my body,
Yeah.
so that I can like communicate with it better. I'm like always multiple people.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Multiple selves.
identify with that. That feels very familiar to me as well. You know, that's an
Mhm.
interesting thing. I'm thinking also about just like this class that I'm offering, and like I've been trying to think about like who it's for, you know, and like
Mhm.
what people can expect from it. And I think one of the things that I maybe have not named is like if you're struggling with feeling what's going on in your body, like if you're struggling to feel your feelings, like this might be a good class.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you ever struggle to feel your feelings?
Um, yes. And I think I'm actually recently, you know, I felt like, um, no, I feel my feelings so deeply and I feel, you know, they're so intense and sometimes too much and like whatever. But lately I've been noticing the ways that the more the more I allow myself to feel my feelings, the easier it is to feel my feelings. Like they, and
It's
what,
weird. It's
yes,
weird, right? What
and
a funny process.
I know, and then what happens as a result is that I notice subtler feelings, and then
Mhm.
those subtler
Mhm.
feelings, you know, my body doesn't have to scream quite so loud. Like
Right.
I ended a short-lived, I got love bombed basically, and I
Mm.
ended a short-lived relationship, and like we had a conversation where I left feeling like, cool, I think we like landed in a good place, you know? And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, that's over. I
Mm.
just knew that it was over in my body. Like I could feel it in my body as soon as I woke up.
Mhm.
And I was really struck by that because I think that, you know, most of my life I would have been like, well, maybe it only feels like it's over because you're afraid that it's over, or like maybe you only
Right.
feel that because you're stressed, or like
Mhm.
that could be an indication of anything, you know. And
Yeah.
I just stopped that thought process in its tracks, and I was like, just go with your gut on this, and like let yourself believe that it's over. Like, how does that feel?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, that feels right.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
was it. I didn't have to deliberate. I didn't have to like dwell on it, you know, for days or weeks or months. I just was
Mhm.
like, no, that's it. That's what that
Mhm.
feels like. It's over. And
Mhm.
there was so much relief in that. So
Yeah.
I could have like talked myself out of it or into something else or been like, you know, give it a few days or whatever. And I was like,
Right.
I don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big things that the big like awareness moments that I've had in the past couple of years in terms of like my trauma recovery has been that I have always known what the truth is, right? Like I've always, since I was a little child, right? Since I was a little baby, I've always known what is going on with me. Unfortunately, as I've lived my life or when I was growing up, I learned a lot of I learned a lot of ways of sort of like turning that voice off,
Right.
right? Like telling myself that the way that I was feeling was wrong because other people were telling me that the way that I was feeling was wrong, or that I shouldn't feel that way, or whatever, you know, trying to like pressure myself to like do things, or do things I didn't want to do, or be a certain way that I didn't really want to be, or like to the point where it got hard for me to even know, you know, to really have a solid sense of self.
Yes.
And I feel like this practice, like what you're talking about, and this practice is like, it's meant to help. It has helped me, and I think I would say it's like meant to help other people to like get back to that place of like being aware and confident that you know your own truth, that you know how you feel, you know how your body feels, you know what you really want, you know what you really don't want, and to sort of build that trust with yourself so that you can live honestly in your life and in your relationships with other people. Because it's like you said, like you woke up and you knew what you felt, and you knew what you wanted and didn't want, and you didn't like sit there questioning yourself or like deliberating about it.
Right.
Which is not to say that like we'll always be sure immediately once
No, and
we're
it's
like practicing
also
this stuff,
right, and it's also not to say that it wasn't hard or sad, you know, like I was like,
exactly.
that sucks.
Yeah. Gotta feel feelings. That's
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like this is a really good stopping place. I always love talking to you about these things. I feel like I uncover new or like turn over stones that I didn't know were there whenever we chat about these things. Is there anything that you want to announce or tell everyone about?
I will. I gotta get better at this. I'll just reiterate. I am a pro-dom. I am a consent and boundaries educator and coach, and I offer one-on-one sessions, coaching sessions, consulting sessions, and I also offer pro-dom BDSM sessions, both live and in person, and also virtually. So you can go to my bio and you can go to my website, and there's lots of information about some of those services, my BDSM services. So that's my plug. And then I was gonna ask if you have anything to plug. I know you have stuff to plug.
I do.
I do. I know you'll plug it. But a question that I wanted to ask you, that pertains to the course that you're going to start next week, is what is confidence?
Oh, I think of confidence as like a certainty in myself and a trust in myself, that I will be okay, that I am capable of like moving through discomfort, that I am safe in my body, and yeah, I think of it as like a general awareness that I will be okay. And
Yeah.
I think that what happens when it often comes from, as you said, specificity and oftentimes like specificity of um, language, by which I mean like knowing that I will be able to express myself. So like no
Mm-hmm.
matter what my feeling is, no matter what my need is or my boundary is, and even like what almost no matter what kind of stress response I'm having, I will be able to express myself and ask for what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily eloquently or gracefully, like if
Yeah.
I'm in a stress response, but that like I have my own back. Um,
Yeah.
which is why the class is set up so that we're doing class 1 is confidence and class 2 is self-advocacy. So we're going to get in touch with our confidence and our power, and then we're going to practice advocating for ourselves and advocating for other people, and then do a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
practice exercises. So that's when I think about confidence, I think about yeah, like the assured feeling that I have that I'm going to be okay and that I have my own back and that I will be able to express myself in almost any situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think of confidence in that way too, that like kind of similarly to like consent is not permission, or like
Mm.
permission is only a part of a consent,
Mm-hmm.
but like so many people think that consent is just permission.
Right.
Like to me, confidence is this sense of like having your own back, but
Yeah.
not it's but confidence is not you being right all the time, or like
No.
you being sure that you're right. Like confidence
No. Or
is,
even like thinking that you're the shit, you know?
mm-hmm, yeah,
Like I
yeah,
think, and one of the things that we're going to do in the class, the first class, is we're going to talk about the difference between confidence and arrogance.
right, yeah,
Because
mm-hmm.
I don't mean that we shouldn't think that we're the shit. I think that we should all think that we are all spectacular. I
Yeah,
think that there's like where arrogance comes in is that it's not embodied. It's a performance, and that it generally also comes along with sort of ideas about like hierarchizing people. Like I'm better than you. Whereas I
mm-hmm.
think that confidence is more of this like deeply embodied sensation of like I'm going to be okay. I've got my back. I know how to communicate what I need to communicate. And that
Mm-hmm.
you carry that with you, no matter what. And it's not something that you're trying to
Right.
convince anyone of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to
So,
talk about apologizing in this class?
yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. But it's not like I don't have it like on the syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I am offering this 4-week class coming up. It starts next week. Um, I'm uh, I'm also offering a consent and your business class towards the end of February. There's also an in-person class that I have not announced yet that is up on my website, but I have not mentioned it on Instagram yet. There is also my educator training. So if you're looking to like build your business around this stuff, those applications are open. I'm also taking private clients, but I don't do much of that anymore. So that's all I got, I think. And I hope to see some of you all in class. It's going to be a small group this time.
I'm excited for your class, for you to have your class.
Thank you. Well, good to see you as always.
Good
And
to see you.
I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, V. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.